Today, we're going to talk about the different types of foreigners you might meet in Japan. Number one is the weeb or otaku, and I realize they're slightly different, but for efficiency, we're going to kind of put them together. So they are fascinated with Japanese culture, maybe anime, maybe manga, or different aspects of Japanese culture. And they really enjoy being in Japan. They're kind of like a kid in a candy store. At times, I'm actually kind of envious of the weeb or otaku because they're just having a great time enjoying the culture, really getting immersed in life in Japan. The next is the student. Now, a lot of people come to Japan to study Japanese, or they may pass the N1 and get into a Japanese university. A lot of times you might meet them at your local convenience store, like a 7-Eleven, working behind the counter. Now, be extra nice to them because they have a very difficult job. The next is the person who's still living in the bubble. Now, the 80s and 90s in Japan were a really special period, unprecedented economic growth. Things were going crazy. The exchange rate was very favorable to the Japanese yen, not like today. But those people are still kind of living in the bubble, and you'll hear them say things like, man, Roppongi was so much better in the 90s, or everything was so much better before the Lehman crash. Now, we've got the people who are living in the bubble, like the 80s and 90s, even though technically the bubble ended in the early 90s or maybe 1990. Somebody tell me in the comments below, fact check me there. But that bubble ended, but Japan still had it really good in the 90s. Now, there's people who are living in a bubble, and it's kind of a self-created bubble. It's something you can easily fall into if you're not careful. So they may shop at Costco, maybe drive everywhere, never take the trains, only have English-speaking friends, never watch Japanese TV, things like that. And you'll be able to spot them because they say things like, I've been living in Yokosuka for 30 years. Actually, the name of the town is Yokosuka, and I'll put the spelling down here, but they'll say things like, my wife Mariko and I have 3 kids, and the last one just got into college, so I can't retire yet. But it's very easy to fall into that type of bubble because if you don't get an opportunity to study Japanese or don't take an opportunity to study Japanese and you can only have English-speaking friends, it's an easy bubble to fall into. I'm in a semi-bubble. A lot of my friends are English speakers just because, you know, I get along easier with them. I have more in common. Now, I do watch Japanese TV every once in a while, mostly streaming. I know a few Japanese songs, a few Japanese artists. I haven't completely put myself in a bubble. I have Japanese friends, and I do take public transportation, so I'm in a semi-bubble, especially socially. Then we have the 1 week expert, and I just made that term up because I don't know any other word for it, and I don't mean it in a derogatory sense, but it's a person who has much more academic knowledge of Japan than actual experience in Japan. So a conversation, and I'm going to change names and book titles, but conversation I had with somebody who was visiting Japan for a week. I said, hey, what are you working on in Japan? They said, oh, I'm writing a book. I said, really, what's it called? They said, oh, it's the Definitive Guide to Japanese History. They're planning to be here for 1 week, write a book, and go back and publish it. There's the YouTuber, and I mean this with the utmost respect. There are some very successful YouTubers in Japan, and I think they would have been successful online anyway. It just so happens that they're creating content in Japan. There's Chris Broad, and his channel is, I mean, it's an excellent branding decision, Abroad in Japan. And all these content creators I'm going to talk about, I'm going to put links in the description. So Chris works with Joey, he works with Sea-Dog. He's got a whole group of friends who create amazing content. Like I said, most of these people would have been successful wherever they worked. They just so happen to work in Japan. And they say never meet your heroes, but I met Daniel and Yuka, and they are just as cool in real life as they are on their YouTube live streams. And I encourage you to watch some of their live streams because they're a really charming, wholesome couple, and I just love to hear them talk about little things they're seeing as they walk around Tokyo. There's also Dogen. I've mentioned him a couple of times. I want to tell you about a podcast by a buddy of mine named John, and it's called the Ohazas Podcast, meaning Ohayo gozaimasu, or short for Ohayo gozaimasu. I might have forgotten a few, and I'll add them later. Maybe remind me if I forgot somebody that's a really big creator working in Japan. Next, we've got the LBH, and I really don't like this word, but it's used a lot, and so that's the only thing I can think of is LBH. LBH means loser back home. Now, I think of it as a person who never really hit their stride, never really hit it big on the dating scene, comes to Japan, they have a unique talent that is needed in Japan, or they have an exotic look. Suddenly they're popular with the opposite sex. Their social calendar is full. Now, I was an LBH, I'll admit it, but I was more of an LLBH because I'm a lawyer, loser lawyer back home. If I were working in the States, since I didn't have the highest academic marks, I didn't go to the best law school, I would just be a regular attorney making a normal living. But since I speak Japanese and I live in Japan, and there was a big boom of antitrust cases, I was able to get in on that boom and ride that wave, and it made a huge difference in my life. So an LBH, if they can take advantage of the chance to move to Japan and reinvent themselves and then ride that wave, they can have a very successful career, very successful life. There's also the NBH, the normal back home. Now, they're a person who maybe has a normal job, gets sent over to Japan for their job, maybe for a special project. Maybe they have a special skill that's needed in Japan. They need to come debug a program or come work on a sales program or marketing campaign. And since they're only here for a short time and the company has a budget, and by the way, I don't know how these budgets work for expats, but the company has a budget. They put them in Oakwood, which is a luxury furnished apartment. And the company has a membership to the Tokyo American Club. They say, hey, you can use our membership, and you have your expense account, and they're living it up, just doing their job in Japan. I got a really funny story about that. But they have a better lifestyle than the average person does because the company's kind of footing the bill. And frankly, that's what I went to law school for, is I wanted to get one of those positions. So I got a funny story about an NBH. There was a female Japanese coworker of mine who fell in love with an NBH when he was visiting Japan. And he was staying at Oakwood. He was going to the American Club, and he took her to dinner there. Really nice restaurants, by the way. And they dated for a few months. He was here for like 3 months. They dated for a few months. And he said, hey, I know this is very sudden, but I'd like you to come back to America with me to meet my family. And so she did. They landed. They went to a small town on a dirt road where he drove a pickup truck, and he lived next to a dairy farm. If you've ever been near a dairy farm, you know what they smell like. She was totally disappointed. She's like, this is not what I signed up for. And then she found out she was pregnant. They got married, and they have a couple kids together. They're very happy. So that worked out. But the NBH is a lucky person who gets to live a much better lifestyle while they're in Japan than they did back home. There's also the executive. I've met a lot of executives, really top-level lawyers and bankers who would have been successful any country they worked in. They just happen to work in Japan, have a fantastic lifestyle. Now we have the entrepreneur. I know a couple of these. And by the way, I have a podcast. If you want to check out the podcast, it's much more long form. It goes from 45 minutes to 2 hours, maybe even longer. But if you want to check that out, once again, I'll put a link in the description. Have a couple entrepreneurs, Terry Lloyd, Alex DeVore, and they would have been entrepreneurs anywhere they live, but foreign entrepreneurs seem to pick up on ideas that most Japanese don't pick up on because they see things from a different perspective. Also, Japanese are more risk averse. If you come over to Japan with a suitcase and you start a company and you lose everything, you go back to square one, it's not that much of a big deal. But if you've gone to a Japanese university, you got a job at a major company, and then you leave, start your own company, and lose everything, there are much bigger social consequences than if you're a foreigner who loses everything, go back to square one. Don't forget the crypto bro. A lot of young people who invested in crypto really early and ended up making a lot of money. I got a buddy who was telling me he had an apartment in Tokyo and we were gonna hang out, and he said, oh, I can't hang out next week. I'll be in Thailand for a couple months, but I gotta come back because I've ordered a Lamborghini and I have to be here when it gets delivered. So there's the crypto bros. Like I said, invested really early, ended up being very successful, and Japan is one of their stops of the places they love to stay. I don't have a really good name for this, but there's the never going back home gaijin. They may have visited home while they're in the honeymoon stage of culture shock in Japan, and they may have gone home, experienced reverse culture shock, and decided, I'm never going back there again. They can only find negative things about their home country. Japan does everything perfect. Home sucks. I'm never going back. That type of thing. I went through that stage once, but then I just started to appreciate that they're just different countries. So there's the gone native foreigner, and they think that they were Japanese in a past life. They speak fluent Japanese, or at least think they do, like me, which I've been told. They watch Japanese TV, listen to Japanese music, and maybe drink green tea instead of coffee. In their apartment, they don't have any Western furniture. They may have a kotatsu. Kotatsu is just a table that's low to the ground, and it's heated, so in the winter, you can put your legs under there, stay warm, eat dinner, watch TV from the kotatsu. They may even sleep on a roll-up futon. The person who's gone native has learned the rules. They expect other foreigners to learn the rules. They want to close the borders, no more immigration, no more tourism. Japan is for all the Japanese people and me, because I fit in. Now there's the micro-gaijin, and to them, everything's a microaggression. They're the foreigner who gets horribly offended when you hand them a knife and fork instead of chopsticks. They're the foreigner, I've done this before, who gets offended when you give them an English menu, because like I said, Japanese tend to lump everybody into a group. They tend to treat every foreigner as if they just got off the airplane. The micro-gaijin, everybody wonders why they're still here. They can't even explain why they're here. But give them a break, they might be in the second stage of culture shock. I got a video about the 4 stages of culture shock. You can check it out here. And I got a video about the different types of Japanese you might meet right there. Check it out.